Hello and welcome to the Brave Hearts, Bold Minds podcast, Growing Fine Young Men. I'm Lee Hatcher. Thanks for joining me as we explore a whole host of ideas and opportunities and seek to help the boys of today grow into the fine young men of tomorrow. Each week I'll be interviewing an educator from the Scots College in Sydney to find out what makes boys tick and how to equip parents of school-age boys with practical insights so their sons can be built up and their characters strengthened for wisdom and compassion. So let's ring the bell and meet our guest for this week's podcast. With me today is Conrad Nixon. Conrad is Senior Chaplain at the Scots College and his title is Boys Need a Sense of Hope. Conrad, welcome.
Thank you, Lee. It's good to be here.
It's great to meet you. I want to begin with the legendary tale of Pilgrim's Progress, and for the uninitiated, briefly take us through the story and what's the connection with this notion of hope?
It's a great book, Pilgrim's Progress. I must admit I'm a little bit hazy on some of the details, having read it as a boy, and that's quite some years ago, but it is a great story. I think one of the great things about it is that it's the sort of story that really appeals to boys in the sense that it's a great quest. The key character is a guy by the name of Christian. He's on a journey. He's trying to reach a celestial city. And along the way, he confronts all manner of challenges and setbacks and disappointments. There's great things going on with castles and with monsters and with being captured and then escaping and falling into pits and getting distracted along the way.
Yes.
But it's a great story in and of itself. But more significantly, it's really, I think, a great allegory of life. It picks up on notions that are real and that are true to everyone's experience, that there are setbacks along the way, that there are disappointments, that there is hurt, that there are distractions. All of these things are real for all of us. And yet through the story, Christian has that sense of hope. He knows that he has acceptance because at the heart of his journey is this desire to reach the celestial city. So he has this acceptance in the sense that he knows that he belongs to God. He knows that he's a part of an exciting quest and that at the end of which there are inestimable rewards. So
there's a goal in mind.
There's a goal in
mind.
Through. That's right.
And a hopeful goal.
Absolutely. And so alongside of, or in conjunction with the challenges and the disappointments, there's the notion that it is a part of something exciting and that he's going to get there in the end. And so he's inspired by hope.
Okay, so how do we fit that into a world where boys, and for that matter girls, are often told you can be whatever you want to be and it's kind of all about me and life is about feeling happy? Because that's not entirely consistent with that story, is it?
That's right. And I think, that notion that it is all about me, that it is all about being happy, that I can be whatever I want to be. I don't think that's a helpful message. I think that in one sense, it's a superficial way to live life, thinking that it's all about happiness and it's all about me.
It's pretty impossible, really.
It's also very naive to
Yes,
think that we can live that sort of a life. And in the end, it can become quite selfish as well and actually disconnect us from others and from reality.
You say the biblical character of King Solomon informs this somewhat. What do you mean by that?
Well, Solomon, whose story is told in some detail in the Old Testament, one of the kings of Israel, one of Israel's most powerful kings. He was renowned for his wisdom. He was renowned for the prosperity that Israel enjoyed during his reign. He was immensely prosperous himself. And
had it all.
And he had it all.
Yes.
He had countless numbers of wives and concubines. He had immense wealth and lands and orchards and crops. And yet, as he reflects upon his life and upon his achievements and upon his great success and his great wealth, he uses this phrase that at the end of the day, it was just a chasing after the wind. It was meaningless. It left him feeling empty and really asking the question, well, is this all there is? There's got to be more to it than that.
Sounds a bit depressing.
It is depressing, yes. And Solomon's writings are quite depressing. He continually returns to this notion of meaninglessness and emptiness. But I think in the end, he forces his readers to ask that question, is there more than this? And if so, what? And I think what it points us to eventually is the notion that if we are going to have a sense of hope, if we're going to find meaning and purpose, then we're going to have to be prepared to look beyond the material, beyond the immediate.
Where do you look?
I think that hope can be nurtured in many, many ways, but I think there's a few key things. One thing I think that's critical is that boys and girls, for that matter, are encouraged to see that their worth lies not in what they achieve or in what they possess, but their worth actually is in the fact that they are human, that they are created and loved by God. Their worth lies in the fact that they can love and be loved, that they have wonderful qualities in and of themselves, quite apart from what they achieve or what they own or what they gain. And I think that within the home, within the school, within other contexts, they need to be reassured of the fact that their worth is intrinsic to their humanity. They need to be hearing messages of unconditional acceptance and love. They need to know that they are valued not because of what they achieve, but because of who they are. They need to know that despite failings, despite weaknesses, that there's always the prospect of a fresh start, of fresh beginnings. They need to know that notwithstanding the brokenness that surrounds them and perhaps is a part of their own lives, that things will not always be as they are now, that there is the prospect of a fresh start and of something better for the future.
Is it too much to say that this is about living the life designed by the author of life?
I think that's absolutely it. Absolutely it. And I think related to that is the notion that hope comes when we realise that we are a part of something bigger. Yes. And that we not only find acceptance and love and forgiveness and the prospect of a brighter future because we are creatures of God, but also the fact that we can be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And so I think that hope comes when boys are able to be involved in noble ventures, yes, when they can be busy in the service of others, when they can recognise that they can play a role in transforming the world around them. I think of a piece that I read in relation to the 1995 Rugby World Cup and the South African team led by Francois Pienaar, and he spoke about the fact that he and his teammates were inspired by the notion that they were a part of something bigger than themselves and bigger than just the game of rugby. They actually, largely through the inspiration of Nelson Mandela, they came to see that they were actually playing a role in bringing healing and reconciliation and hope to a nation.
Yes.
And as they grasped that, they found inspiration in that. And I think that that's true for boys. I think that one of the problems with the notion of it's all about me, it's all about my happiness, is that it actually disconnects us from others, and it disconnects us from something bigger than ourselves. When we grasp that idea that we can find hope and connection and a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose as we seek to serve and transform others, that's inspiring. I think of the words of Booker T. Washington, the civil rights leader in the US, and he spoke about how one of the best ways that we can lift ourselves up is by seeking to lift others up. And as we engage in those transformative works of serving others, that brings us a sense of hope and purpose. And I think, one of the exciting opportunities that boys have at Scots is to actually engage in service learning projects, yeah, and in projects that take them out of themselves, that connect them with others and give them a sense that they are a part of something bigger than themselves.
And for that matter, way beyond Scots, there are always opportunities, absolutely, for any boy,
absolutely,
or girl or man or woman to serve their fellow human beings.
Absolutely.
You say there are three fundamental ways of nurturing hope in a boy. Take us briefly through those, Conrad.
So I've probably talked about two of them. I think the first critical thing is a boy's own sense of identity and recognising where his worth ultimately lies. And again, we need to be getting alongside boys and sharing in and honouring their activities and their achievements and celebrating those wonderful things that we do, but we need to also be reassuring them that their worth doesn't ultimately lie in their success, as it were.
Or even in what they do.
That's
regardless
right.
of success.
Absolutely, because when those things fail or when those things come to an end, then they can be left with a sense of hopelessness and worthlessness. And so there needs to be words spoken into their lives about unconditional love and acceptance, about forgiveness, about the fact that whatever the state of their lives at the moment, that there is the prospect of change, there is the prospect of growth. But the second thing that I mentioned is that notion of being connected to things bigger than ourselves and being connected to others, being engaged in noble causes, seeing that we have a role to play in actually transforming and contributing to the world around us and to the lives of others. I think perhaps the third thing is to actually be able to catch a glimpse of something that's more abiding. I think that, when we're very small, oftentimes everything around us can seem quite stable and, we kind of think that things will always be that way and everything's under control. As we grow older, we start to become more aware of the brokenness in the world around us, perhaps the brokenness in our own lives. We become more aware of the frailties and the failings of human beings. We become more aware of the fact that even the greatest material things are transient and are passing away. And we perhaps gain a sense that even our own lives are ebbing away and we become more aware of the brevity of life. And I think that boys need to be developing a sense of those things that are more abiding. And the very best thing, I think, is that if boys can actually gain a glimpse of the eternal, and, the great message that Christ brings is that we are loved and accepted by God, that we can be engaged in Christ's mission to transform and bring blessing to others, and that we can be a part of a kingdom, to use the biblical word, that is actually eternal and that won't pass away. And that when boys get a sense of that, when anyone gets a sense of that, that's a real anchor for our lives in the midst of the brokenness and the transient nature of things around us.
You talk of the need of seeing that you're part of something bigger. If the Christian message and faith is true, there's nothing much bigger than that. There's
exactly
not much bigger than that.
Exactly right.
Just finally, I'm sure you've seen lots of boys nurtured in this way and helped them and coached them along that kind of journey. Can you think of one in particular for whom hope has been a significant, even transformative part of their life?
Yeah, I can actually think of a boy who I was having a conversation with only a couple of days ago, and this is a boy who, by his own admission, came to Scots without any real sense of or interest in Christian things, who was certainly ambitious, though, for success, but has actually, throughout his school life, throughout much of his life, experienced a great deal of suffering and recently lost a parent as a result of a long battle with sickness. But to look at this young man, it's remarkable to see his resilience. At the heart of his posture and his lifestyle here at Scots is a notion of service. He is a young man who goes out of his way to help others. He's engaged in all sorts of roles that enable him to be a source of encouragement and help to others. And in the midst of what's been a really tough several years for him, he's found real strength in being able to see that his life is actually, by God's design, a part of a bigger purpose. And he sees his life as impacting others positively. And it's quite remarkable, actually, to see how his selflessness has enabled him to not only deal with, but actually thrive within the midst of pretty challenging personal situations.
What a great privilege to see that working for real at ground zero, at the ground level. Conrad Nixon,
yes.
Thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Been my pleasure.
If you'd like more information about growing your boy into a fine young man, you can subscribe to receive useful articles and news from the Scots College. It's free and offered to every parent. who wants the very best for their boy in their journey to manhood. In your internet search engine, enter the Scots College e-newsletter to subscribe. I'm Lee Hatcher. Hope you'll join me again next week on the Brave Hearts, Bold Minds podcast, Growing Fine Young Men. Conrad, you've seen this button here. That's the bell. Will you please ring us out?
I'll be glad to. Thanks, Lee.